Welcome back after the break. You're watching Indus News and I'm Fiza Jamal bringing you detailed stories. A rocket attack has hit residential and operations headquarters of several global oil companies in southern Iraq. Police say 2 Iraqi workers were wounded in the attack in Basra city. U.S. oil giant ExxonMobil says it will evacuate 20 foreign staff after rocket hit the Burjesa site west of the city. No group has yet claimed responsibility. It follows 2 separate attacks in as many days on bases housing U.S. military personnel in Iraq. Last month, the U.S. evacuated hundreds of staff from its Baghdad embassy, blaming threats by Iran against its interests in Iraq. This comes less than 24 hours after the Pentagon announced it will send 1,000 more troops to the Middle East. Iran has refused to extend its 60-day deadline before renouncing parts of the 2015 nuclear deal. Tehran's atomic energy spokesman Behruz Kamalvandi says EU leaders must fulfill promises to save the agreement. German Chancellor Angela Merkel warned Iran of consequences if it violates the international agreement. Russia says Tehran's forced and sporadic steps on the 2015 accord can be reversed. It called for restraint from all sides in the Middle East to avoid destabilizing the region. At the UN Security Council, Russia and China blocked a U.S. request for more sanctions on North Korea's petroleum imports. Washington asked the Sanctions Committee to issue an order halting Pyongyang's deliveries of refined petroleum. The U.S. says there's been 79 illegal deliveries of fuel to North Korea this year, mainly by sea. The U.S. accuses Pyongyang of breaching an annual UN cap of 500,000 barrels imposed in 2017. Russia and China rejected the U.S. bid, saying Pyongyang's imports are in line with the Security Council resolutions. Russia has passed a bill suspending its role in the Intermediate Range Nuclear Forces Treaty. President Vladimir Putin submitted the bill at the end of May when the U.S. renounced the treaty. The bill has to be endorsed by the Federation Council, the upper house of parliament, and then signed into law by President Putin. It has already passed the Russian State Duma and empowers the president to renew the treaty. Leonid Slutsky says the U.S. is exploiting the Russian threat myth to move weapons to Russian borders. This comes a day after Washington and Moscow accused each other of resuming uranium enrichment. Moving on to Mali now, where at least 41 people were killed after 100 gunmen stormed 2 villages in the center of the country. Government officials say the unidentified attackers raided the village of Yoro on motorbikes and killed 24 ethnic Dogons. Another 17 were killed in the nearby village of Gangafani. Earlier in the week, Fulani attackers raided a Dogon village, killing at least 35 people. In March, suspected Dogon militiamen killed more than 150 Fulani herders in similar attacks. Both groups are locked in a conflict that has led to multiple attacks just this year. Myanmar's Rohingya have demanded the resignation of UN Chief Antonio Guterres for negligence and failure in dealing with their crisis in Myanmar. A UN report found systematic failure in its handling of the Myanmar situation before the Rohingyas' mass exodus in 2017. It says the UN lacked a unified strategy and Security Council support to handle the situation. The report, however, does not pin responsibility for failure on any single person. Libyan government forces have destroyed arms and ammunition supplies for rebel commander Khalifa Haftar's forces. The government of National Accord launched the attacks near Gharian, south of Tripoli. The air raids targeted an incoming munitions convoy heading for the front, south of Tripoli. The Libyan parliament in Tripoli has unanimously voted to remove the position of Army General Commander. The spokesman for the House of Representatives says all members who attended the session agreed to scrap the post created in 2015. U.S. President Donald Trump has formally launched his 2020 re-election campaign. He began his campaign at a gathering of 20,000 supporters in Orlando, Florida. During his 80-minute speech, Trump reiterated key themes of his winning 2016 campaign. He pledged to continue a crackdown against illegal immigration. Trump also lashed out at Democrats, accusing them of trying to rip your country apart. Trump said he would oversee cures for cancer and AIDS and pave the way to send U.S. astronauts to Mars. Trump repeatedly encouraged the crowd to boo journalists covering the event, calling them fake news. Early polls place Trump behind some potential Democratic challengers.
We went through the greatest witch hunt in political history. The only collusion was committed by the Democrats, the fake news media and their operatives, and the people who funded the phony dossier, crooked Hillary Clinton and the DNC. It was all an illegal attempt to overturn the results of the election, spy on our campaign, which is what they did, and subvert our democracy.
Patrick Shanahan has withdrawn his nomination to become the next U.S. Secretary of Defense. Shanahan made the decision after reports of domestic violence in Shanahan's family. President Donald Trump has picked the Army Secretary Mark Esper for the defense job. Shanahan took office in January when Jim Mattis resigned over policy differences with Trump. It's the second abrupt departure in less than 6 months at the Pentagon. Trump says he did not ask Shanahan to drop his bid.
Pat Shanahan, who is a wonderful person, is, as you know, going to take some time off for family matters. And I want to thank him for his service. He is a terrific person, and it's a difficult time for Pat, but he's going to take a little time off for family service. And
moving on to UK, 5 leadership hopefuls will face a third vote in the race to replace Theresa May as Prime Minister. Brexit campaigner Boris Johnson has cemented his lead by winning 126 votes in the second ballot. Former Brexit Minister Dominic Raab was eliminated from the Tory leadership race with 30 votes. Jeremy Hunt, Michael Gove, Sajid Javid and Rory Stewart all made it to the third round. Further ballots later in the week will whittle down the candidates to a final 2.
The following candidates are now eligible to continue on to the next ballot on Wednesday, the 19th of June at 3 p.m. Michael Gove, Jeremy Hunt, Sajid Javid, Boris Johnson and Rory Stewart. Thank you very much.
And rivals in the Tory leadership race have ruled out a general election until Brexit. Britain's premiership hopefuls clashed over the Brexit deadline in a television debate. More in this report.
Following Boris Johnson's lead in the second ballot, leadership rivals came face-to-face in a live TV debate. 5 men vying to be the UK's next Prime Minister ruled out calling a general election until Brexit was resolved. Contestants debated over leaving the EU by the October 31st deadline with or without a deal. Johnson repeated his pledge that he would take Britain out of the EU by October 31st. He stressed at preparing for a no-deal exit and concentrating on winning a new trade deal.
We must come out on the 31st of October because otherwise I'm afraid we face a catastrophic loss of confidence in politics. We've already kicked the can down the road twice.
Advocating his stance to follow the Brexit deadline, Sajid Javid said it focused minds.
If you don't have a deadline, you do not concentrate minds, and that also includes the minds of our European friends. So we have to set the date.
Michael Gove and Jeremy Hunt said that extra time might be needed for an orderly exit.
If there was a prospect, if we were nearly there, then I would take a bit longer, because the Conservative Party is the party of business, we're the part of the union, we're the party of hope.
Look, if we're almost there on October the 30th, and we just need an extra couple of days to do it, who could object to taking an extra 24 or 48 hours to get it over the line?
Rory Stewart, however, accused his colleagues of lacking realism.
if you tried to negotiate a new deal with the European Union, we'd be stuck in the European Union for months and years to come. It wouldn't be that they would be just a few weeks off getting it done on October 31st. They would hardly have begun.
Brexit has so far been the bone of contention for 2 UK prime ministers who resigned over it.
In more related news, the European Union has delayed its decision on Albania and North Macedonia's bid to join the bloc. The decision has been put off until October. Differences between member countries over the accession of the Balkan states has led to the delay. The German parliament deferred the verdict until September, while the Dutch parliament rejected negotiations with Albania. Italy and Austria are among 13 member states calling for the immediate opening of talks with both countries. The EU Council has taken note of the Commission's recommendation to open accession negotiations.
We saw today a confirmation that the European Union as a whole backs the European perspective of the Western Balkans. The Council also underlines the geostrategic importance of integrating the Western Balkans, and as I said it in my introduction today,
German Chancellor Angela Merkel says Western sanctions against Russia can only be lifted if Ukraine's sovereignty is restored. She says the sanctions can be withdrawn if Russia returns Crimea to Ukraine. German Chancellor Angela Merkel made the comments in a press conference with Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky. Ukraine's president says his country did not start a war with Russia and hopes to end the conflict soon. Speaking of Iran, Merkel urged the country to uphold the nuclear deal or face the consequences. She says Germany is doing what it can to peacefully diffuse heightened tensions with Iran. The number of people fleeing war, persecution, and conflict worldwide has exceeded 70 million. Developing countries are bearing the burden of hosting most of the world's refugees. A UN Refugee Agency report says the number is over 2 million more than the last year. The number of people fleeing war-torn regions has doubled in the past 20 years. The research records 37,000 new displacements every day. It says half of the world's forcibly displaced people are children. The figure does not include most of the 4 million Venezuelans who have fled abroad since 2015.
Last year we reported 68.5 approximately million people, refugees, displaced people, meaning refugees in their own country, asylum seekers, and this year the figure has increased by almost close to 71.
It's time for us to take a short break. Don't go anywhere, because after the break, more detailed stories are to follow. Welcome back after the break. Let's take you to India, where 10 more children have succumbed to brain fever in Bihar state. The total death toll now stands at 113. The Indian government faces angry protests as it struggles to cope with an encephalitis outbreak. 60 children, mostly under the age of 10, are undergoing treatment in the eastern state's Muzaffarpur district. On Tuesday, people gathered outside the district's main hospital, accusing authorities of acting too slowly. Brain fever breakouts in India typically coincide with lychee season. Ethnic violence has hit the fight against Ebola in northeastern Democratic Republic of Congo. The violence has forced millions to flee, making it tough to trace and treat Ebola patients. Details here.
Ethnic clashes between farming and herding communities have killed at least 161 people in Congo's northeastern province. More than 300,000 people have left their homes in the area since early June. The United Nations warns that the ongoing Ebola fight will complicate if the escalation engulfs the entire province.
As the displacement continues at this massive scale, fears are more people will try to seek safety in Uganda crossing Lake Kaliber. So far, the numbers that we have seen are really small, but it could pick up with around or more than 300,000 people now fleeing within the last 2 weeks.
Congo government is trying to bring the intense situation under control. The Ebola epidemic spread to Uganda last week, with people fleeing. Fears are high that the treatment process will receive a hard blow.
The mobility of the population in North Kivu and in Tory is a risk factor. So every time you have people moving in high numbers, it's more complicated to do the work on follow-ups, contact tracing, follow on people who are supposed basically to be observed for on a daily basis for 21 days.
An Ebola epidemic in Congo has caused 2,168 infections since August last year, including 1,449 deaths.
An electric airplane capable of flying with 9 passengers made its debut at the Paris Air Show on Tuesday. The new plane is meant to revolutionize regional short-distance travel. Details in this report.
Cutting down on air pollution from emissions is a major challenge for the airline industry. Airplane manufacturer Aviation may have the answer. It introduced Alice, an electric airplane that can cover a distance of over 1,000 kilometers.
This is going to make flights cheaper, and it's going to make flights more comfortable, less noisy, actually less bumpy because of all sorts of technological advances we've built into it. And I think this long-term development would be that clients like the product, the end clients, the passengers, like the product. So more and more companies will need or will decide to go into this market. The pie will grow, if you will. More people will actually fly because of planes like this.
Alice is meant for high-traffic regional travel, such as Paris to Toulouse in France. American airline company Cape Air has placed a double-digit purchase order for the aircraft.
So today we can do 650 miles on a charge, plus the necessary 45 minutes IFR reserve. And again, if you drained it to the bottom and you want to charge from zero or almost zero, from the reserve to full, it will take you about an hour and 20 minutes. But assuming you've flown about 1 hour, you can top up in half an hour.
Alice comes with lower energy and maintenance costs. It will undergo test flights this year and obtain certification in 2021. This will clear it for commercial use in 2022.
Environmentalists have called on Southeast Asian countries to ban plastic and electric waste imports from the developed world. Regional leaders will be attending an Association of Southeast Asian Nations meeting in Bangkok this week. Details of this report.
China was once the biggest garbage importer in the world. This changed last year when Beijing banned waste imports. Millions of tons of trash was then diverted to less well-regulated countries nearby. Now, Greenpeace Malaysia has urged all ASEAN nations to follow China's example.
Our recommendation is to ask the ASEAN countries to immediately ban all the imports of plastic waste, and especially the Southeast Asian country, the governments, they have to rectify the Basel ban amendments. The second one, the governments, especially from Southeast Asia, they have to establish a holistic regional policy to reduce single-use productions.
Southeast Asian waste importers have also been called to rectify the Basel ban amendment. This is an international treaty meant to restrict the movement of hazardous waste. Representatives of the ASEAN nations will meet in Bangkok this week. One of the issues they will discuss is plastic pollution in the ocean.
This is the call to action from the network of community and civil society and human rights advocate that and community rights advocate that we want to call on ASEAN.
Currently, Thailand aims to eradicate plastic waste imports by 2020. Indonesia, Philippines, Vietnam, Thailand and China account for 60% of plastic waste leakage into the oceans.
Armies of dwarves, goblins, elves, and orcs are clashing in a Czech countryside forest. The fictional realms come together for a reenactment of J.R.R. Tolkien's fantasy bestseller, The Hobbit. Details in this report.
The battle for Middle-earth rages on as all 5 realms draw their weapons in the Czech Republic. A forest of stands witness to the epic final battle of the 5 armies. Spears, swords, and axes clang with furious humans, elves, dwarves, orcs, and goblins locking horns. The mythical scene unfolds as readers of J.R.R. Tolkien's The Hobbit join a live-action role-play game. Participants are decked out in elaborate costumes to embark on Bilbo Baggins' journey to the Lonely Mountain.
You are constantly improving your costume. Usually you don't have just one. You wear one thing as a dwarf and something else for another race of characters.
No blood is shed in the battle as the ruthless and fierce combatants use weapons made out of foam. The Arch-Emperor Nauraukuru says the only rule of the battle is to avoid being killed.
This battle is about lives, where you get more lives for your costume, and every hit with a weapon takes 1 life from you, or from arrows, 2 lives.
For the participants, the costumed event is an outlet to escape life's mechanical routine and indulge in the fantasy.
I've been coming here for 1 year now. I like the atmosphere, the costumes, and the fun here. I like it because I need to get rid of the aggression I have from the customers in my shop.
The weary warriors pick up their weapons and return to a nearby campsite to rest, forming up the battle lines again. The outcome of the annual event depends on the results of a series of smaller battles taking place over several days.
In the world of business, stocks in Asia have risen following positive developments on the US-China trade front. On Wall Street, stocks surged overnight after President Donald Trump telephoned Chinese President Xi Jinping. In early trading, mainland Chinese stocks soared with the Shanghai Composite gaining 1.47%. Hong Kong's Hang Seng Index also jumped. Over in South Korea, the Kospi gained 0.97%. Japan's Nikkei 225 jumped after early gains in SoftBank Group shares. Australian futures rose over 1%. In currencies, the dollar hit a 2-week high early today, ahead of the Federal Reserve's closely watched meeting. The dollar index was steady against 6 major currencies at 97.6%. In the world of sports, in the ICC Cricket World Cup 2019, New Zealand and South Africa are set to face each other at Birmingham's Edgbaston Stadium. The toss was delayed by a wet outfield. New Zealand have played 4 matches without a loss, while South Africa have played 5 matches, winning only 1 of them. The Black Caps stand 3rd on the points table with the Proteas at 8th. Defeat will knock South Africa out of the World Cup. And now we'll give you a quick look at the weather around the globe. These are all the stories in detail we have for you this hour. Stay tuned for further updates only on Indus News.